We've got about $6 billion of these preferreds. We pay out about $600 million a year in dividends. The company enterprise value is about $120 billion. And we sell about $20 billion worth of equity a year. Mm-hmm. So you think about this, we basically sell the first $600 million of the equity, we use it to fund the dividends. The rest of the $20 billion, we just buy more Bitcoin with it. So we're raising capital at a ferocious rate in the equity capital markets, and maybe 5% of the equity capital we've raised, we've earmarked for dividends. The rest, we just buy more Bitcoin. In the event that we couldn't sell equity for some reason, we actually have the Bitcoin itself, and we can sell either credit instruments against it, or we can sell derivatives. So for example, we could sell Bitcoin derivatives. We can sell futures against Bitcoin, or we could sell out of the money call options. And there's something called the basis trade, where you can actually sell the future against the spot, and you can capture a yield if you have Bitcoin as collateral to post against that trade. So the company's primary method of paying the dividends is we just sell equity. Our secondary methods would be to sell derivatives on the Bitcoin itself. And then the credit markets are open to us, so we could also tap various credit markets from time to time.
And is the goal to have these instruments rated by the big credit agencies? And what would that mean?
Yeah, the company's campaign right now is to become the first investment grade Bitcoin Treasury company and crypto company in general, and to get all of the instruments rated by credit rating agencies. And that's an elaborate process of lots and lots of meetings and lots of education.
Oh, really?
But over time, I'm confident we'll get there.
Well, this makes me think of, a lot of people were wondering why you didn't make it into the S&P 500 yet, but it seems like you weren't that surprised, at least for now. Why weren't you included yet?
Well, the S&P has a certain set of criteria, and we didn't qualify for the criteria until just this quarter. So for 5 years, we didn't qualify. You have to be, profitable. You have to check a certain set of boxes. And I think we weren't able to qualify until we had implemented fair value accounting. And so in the second quarter of 2025, that was our first quarter of eligibility. We didn't expect that we would be accepted into the S&P 500 in the first quarter of eligibility. Tesla wasn't accepted in its first quarter of eligibility. We're kind of a revolutionary new company, and this is a revolutionary new asset class. It would be very reasonable for a risk-averse traditional committee of decision makers that are making a decision that's going to determine the flow of billions or hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars capital. It would be reasonable for them to wait a few quarters. They might very well say, let's see what happens with the second. And if this business, turns out to have staying power after 2, 3, 4, 5 quarters. Look, if someone adopted a new idea after 4 quarters of performance, they would be deemed to be quite innovative and progressive, right? Sometimes people wait 3, 4, 5 years before they acknowledge something. So I wouldn't expect it in the first quarter. I would think over some number of quarters, at some point after you've got a track record, in the industry seasons, then I think we will be accepted. I think the S&P's already, they've accepted Coinbase. Mm-hmm. And they've accepted Robinhood. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that they're averse to the crypto asset class and or to Bitcoin or digital assets in general. I just think that exchanges have been around a long time, 100 years, right? And so those businesses have a much longer track record, and so they understand them better. Treasury companies are a really exploding new category of company, and they're very revolutionary. And I date the entire Treasury company industry to November 5th of 2024. I feel like we're 3 quarters into it when it's very clear that this is a legitimate new class of companies. And you can see the markets treating it the same way. We've gone from 60 companies to 185 companies in 12 months. So the industry's in hyper growth mode.
Yeah, we have gone to almost 200 companies, but some of them, that we're seeing the MNAVs compress, we're seeing this consolidation happen. Can you speak to maybe just the market reaction outside of the Bitcoin space? Are they looking at Bitcoin treasury companies as something that will be kind of the institutional investment grade in the future? How do they value these companies? Are you still seeing that adoption really slow, and maybe something will be a catalyst to turn that around?
I think the market's in getting educated mode. I mean, I just had 25 investors and I asked them, how familiar are you with this, and they're like, no. Tell us about Bitcoin, and is Bitcoin going to get banned, not. And we literally have to go back to, no, Bitcoin was actually not going to get banned in 2023.
Right.
And then you have to lay out the crypto industry in general. And then you explain the various credit instruments. Then you explain the equity. And so most of the market's still getting educated. If you wanted a metaphor, imagine that the year was 1870 and people are starting to refine crude oil, and there's a bunch of companies being launched, to do crude oil things, and then someone comes up with an idea for plexiglass or Lexan, and there's polyester, and there's lycra, and there's nylon, and there's all these possible petrochemical
applications,
products, and there's and someone's talking about kerosene, and some guy saying, well, I think we could use diesel or gasoline, and some guy talks about asphalt, and and all the investors are sitting around saying, is this a good idea? How big could this industry be? And they're still struggling with how big could the kerosene business be in 180 countries. And by the way, the first application of kerosene was lamps to light your home. It was light, and then it became engines, and then it became heaters, and then it became jet fuel, and it's rocket fuel today. And so I think the industry is just so embryonic that, the companies are learning how to explain what they're doing. They're deciding what they're going to do. The companies are deciding what their business model will be. The investors are trying to understand the business models and the industry. The regulators, are evolving the regulations, and this is all happening in real time. So this is the digital gold rush in the 10 years from 2025 to 2035. There's going to be a lot of different business models, a lot of different products created, and a lot of different companies launched, and a lot of money made, and there'll be a lot of mistakes made, and there'll a lot of fortunes created, and this is what the chaos of the marketplace.
We only have a few minutes left, so I want to end this on a more personal note. A lot of people just in the last week, they've been feeling really heavy. The nation feels more divided than ever before. People are pulling apart, and they're fighting online. Do you have a message? Because you have clearly found so much hope in Bitcoin, and you always talk about how it empowers the individual. There's nothing out there that serves the rich and the poor more than something like Bitcoin. And I think we need a message of hope right now when our country's been so divided, even, especially in the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination.
I think my message would be that we actually all have a lot more in common, and we agree on a lot more things than the mainstream media would lead you to believe. So, for example, if we take just the Bitcoin community, oftentimes we have very divisive debates in the Bitcoin community between one set of Bitcoiners and another set of Bitcoiners. And when I go online, it could be very toxic and very colorful, very passionate, and people get so worked up. Sometimes they get massively angry at me. They get, one set of developers get massively angry at another set of developers. And I think the irony is that we agree on 99.9% of everything. And when you dig a bit deeper, what you find is that the inflammatory messages tend to run harder. Lies run harder than truth. Extreme positions run harder in cyberspace on X and through the ecosystem. And, even I notice in times of success, like just of late with our company's never been more successful. And yet the amount of hate and toxicity like that gets posted online has never been greater. And then I'll drill down on some of these, on the people posting, all the negativity and the hate and the criticism. And here's what I see oftentimes. I see it's a person that's never interacted with anybody before, and they have 328 followers, and they share none with me. And I look a little bit, and I'm like, this is not even a person. Mm-hmm. This is a bot. And it turns out, I think, that a lot of the toxic, inflammatory behavior online is actually cyber marketing or guerrilla marketing. Like a short seller in my stock has actually paid a digital marketing organization to spin up a bunch of bots to post a bunch of nasty, awful, skeptical cynicism because they think it might work. And it's very transparent to me that someone paid some money to create the appearance of a protest.
Wow.
And I think if you take this in the political realm, same thing. A lot of times the political inflammation is someone paid a digital bot to create the appearance of unhappiness.
To manipulate us.
A lot of times, I think in our country, a lot of protests are paid protests. Someone actually spent money to hire someone to go and protest. And it's a hired, paid for protester. And then what happens is the mainstream media will put the camera on the paid protester, or they'll put the camera on the fake bot, and they'll say, people are up in arms in cyberspace, or they're up in arms in such and such. And they'll put that in front of millions of people and create the appearance of societal dysfunction, unhappiness. And unfortunately, right, if you actually take a fake protest and you amplify it enough, you may convince 1 out of 10 million people to violence, and then it becomes real and it becomes a tragedy and it's awful. But my message to everybody is, I think this might be the tragedy. The Kirk affair might be the tragedy that causes people to realize that there are actually some dysfunctional systems in our society that are in the business of creating inflammation. They're actually creating their divisive systems of amplification. And in fact, the people can be brought back together with a little bit of surgery, find the amplified sources of divisiveness and turn them off, right? Mm-hmm. Turn off the amplifiers of toxicity. And then the other part is just the recognition. It's like, if you read 37 negative comments, you think everybody hates you. Mm-hmm. It's like online, I read things, I think everybody hates everything that I'm doing. And I go out in the real world, I've never met anyone, right, that was unhappy. Like you're like, how come the people in the real world seem so happy and the people online seem so unhappy? And what you're seeing is the cameras, there's a phrase, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yep, I knew it in news.
Right?
Yep.
So the cameras are looking for the civil unrest. Mm-hmm. But my message is the civil unrest is being paid for, right? I think that there are actors that create the civil unrest in cyberspace. They create it in the real world. Then there's unhealthy media that magnifies and amplifies it. And I think the general population is kind of sick and tired, and they're getting more and more aware, right? Like the growing distrust of all of these systems, is an immune mechanism kicking in place. I think generally this is going to catalyze a lot of positive behavior and a lot of constructive humanitarian engagement. And I'm very confident and I'm optimistic over time we'll find our way to a healthier world and a healthier body politic. But it starts with not believing everything you're told, not believing everything you read, thinking for yourself, right? And then I think there is a place for you to recognize when you've got 187 bots in your stream that are amplifying toxicity. Don't engage with them. Don't feed the trolls, because just like when there's 52 paid protesters on your street corner and they were paid to be there, don't go out and fight with them, you know, because they're literally mercenaries paid to do this. Don't spend your time trying to convince them otherwise. They were paid to have a certain opinion, right? That's their job to have that opinion. And we saw that, you know, in a number of crypto wars, you know.
Yeah.
You know, when Greenpeace and the Sierra Club were paid to decide that Bitcoin was not environmentally friendly, you're not going to convince them otherwise. It's not an honest transaction or an honest reaction. It doesn't come from any, you know, from any place of honesty. It was literally paid protest. And so I'm hopeful the society will look at the consequences of paid protest and they'll take a step back.
Well, and there are a lot of connections ultimately to something like Bitcoin being a peaceful revolution and maybe defunding some of these power structures that have really taken advantage of us and trafficked in attention and move it to a system that is peaceful and creates more value for people, right? That's kind of what I always get from your message too of hope in Bitcoin.
So what we always say, Bitcoin is a peaceful, fair, and equitable way for us to settle our differences. As everyone embraces it, peace will spread, equity will spread, fairness will spread, truth will spread, toxicity should decay.